Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you come and listen to this upcoming conversation on corporate innovation's role on the future we are creating. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, and we're so excited to speak with Momin Mirza this episode. He is the Director of Innovation Marketing for Xerox. We're going to be going live with our discussion at 4:03. In the meantime, just some logistics to take care of. You can use the Q&A to ask questions of our panelists, and we'll be leaving 10 to 15 minutes at the end to address those. A little bit about the future we create. It's an online web series where we explore the role of technology in storytelling as we strive to create the future we want to see. This series of fireside chats features Ronnie Kim, founder of Collective Future, and Brian Dolan, founder of Verdant AI, as they speak with innovators and explore topics related to the myths around AI and how technology can be an agent of positive change in the world. About our featured guest, Momin Mirza is the Director of Innovation Marketing at Xerox. Momin and his team are focused on how to bring technological innovation to a spectrum of industries, leveraging both the established heritage of Xerox and PARC to deliver breakthrough technologies in new sciences such as IoT, 3D printing, AI, and clean tech. Momin brings a diverse range and depth of experience covering scientific invention, business strategy, and social psychology. During his tenure in telecoms, Momin filed 9 patents in over 4 years, hitting 75% patent approval. These patents covered network management of connected devices and IoT interactions. In his current role, Momin works closely with business leads from Xerox innovation pillars and executive management to identify and pursue opportunities for commercialization and market expansion. Again, we'll be starting shortly, and please use the Q&A to ask your questions. We'll be answering those in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this conversation. And thank you all again so much for joining us. We know Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and we are so happy to have you here. To everyone that's joining, we'll be starting shortly. Thank you so much for joining us on this Future We Create episode with Momin Mirza, the Director of Marketing for Innovation at Xerox. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I think we're going to get started now. Hi, Momin. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Ronnie. Hey, Brian.
Hello. Ronnie, I wasn't sure if Sandra was going to cue us in. Okay, so hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to our podcast, The Future We Create. It's a salon series that Ronnie and I put together to talk about how we can use narrative to drive innovation. In both of our careers, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what is a story and what does a story mean to us? What does a story mean to us as people, as a species, and in the context of technology? So thank you for joining us and coming to listen to our thoughts on this topic. Hopefully it will inspire some ideas of your own. My name is Brian Dolan. I'm the CEO of Verdant AI. We're a startup studio in Los Angeles, California, and we work with corporate partners to build artificial intelligence companies from the ground up, or sometimes in partnership or conjunction as joint ventures. I myself am a mathematician. I've been building AI products for over 25 years, and I have about 3,000 AI products under my belt. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about what does it mean to create a product, what is a user, and why do we have to have stories within the construction of new ideas. My co-host today is, our co-host every day, is Ronnie Kim from Collective Future. Ronnie, can you introduce yourself and sort of bring in our buddy Momin?
Yes, I won't leave Momin waiting in the wings for too long. I'll be brief. I'm Ronnie Kim, and I'm the co-founder of Collective Future, like Brian just mentioned. And we are a design and strategic innovation studio, and we use future visioning and design and storytelling to really ask some big questions about how, sort of part of what this whole discussion is about, how we create the futures that we want to see. And we're super excited to be joined here by Momin Mirza, really the reason why all of you are here. And so why don't we get started, Momin? I think that was a great little intro that Sandra gave about who you are, but we'd love to hear just from you, if you wouldn't mind, just, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've been doing at Xerox.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So thanks for having me on the program, and really looking forward to our chat. Especially as we touched on some topics prior in the prep. So I work out of the Palo Alto office of Xerox, the very well-known Park Research Center. And normally I'm not in the office, but I happen to be here today to get a decent internet connection. What I do is I work with the R&D teams at Xerox on new products that are coming out of our R&D and that are becoming commercial really for the first time. And so that's really been a strong area of focus for Xerox, especially over the last couple of years, as we're really bringing out a few areas of innovation, some of which were mentioned, I think, in the intro: the 3D printing, IoT, particularly industrial IoT, and others that are still cooking for a little bit of the longer term. And my day-to-day is really around working with the business leaders who have taken charge of these R&D initiatives and sort of committed to bringing them to commercial availability, and bringing out the thought leadership around that, the marketing around that, and customer engagement, preparing for all those things that companies do when they're bringing new offerings to market, and really trying to land their first customer. So it's very, very exciting, and as everyone knows, innovation can be a bit of a roller coaster. So you have to enjoy that ride.
So I'm pretty sure almost everyone has heard of Xerox in this day and age. It's been a really enduring brand, and something that changed the way that people worked. I mean, it's been that way for a lot of years, but I'm really curious if you could talk a little bit about what is Xerox's story today. It's a company that's been around for over 100 years, and you're talking about innovation in some of these new areas that you're getting into: advanced tech, AI, intelligent automation, and things like that. But I'm curious, how do you think about how do you tell the story of Xerox today, and how does it incorporate innovation and your views of the future, or the organization's views of the future, especially when you have, I think, different parts of the organizations. Like you mentioned, Park is super advanced. It's coming up with things that most people haven't even heard of before, and then you've got a brand like Xerox, which is which everyone is so familiar with.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a great question. So I think the way we look at ourselves is from a larger perspective. It's a workplace technology company. We've always been at the forefront of providing technology to help people get their work done. And in some ways, obviously, we pioneered the idea of workplace technology. So company's been around for 114 years. We celebrated our 114th anniversary this year. And really, in many ways, we shaped what communications at work looked like with some of the technologies we invented. Now, looking forward, I mean, we still see ourselves as workplace technology company, but in a much more expansive way, especially as this year, 2020, really instructed all of us what the workplace is and where work gets done have become much more fluid concepts in the digital era. And so we see ourselves not only adjusting to that, but pioneering new technologies and new ways of working and enabling new ways of working, just as we had done in the past. So putting that in perspective as to how does Xerox tell its story, I think the way we are thinking about telling our story is very much along the lines of how our customers see work changing. And I think about innovation, particularly as storytelling, as particularly important in when you're talking about innovation, because practically speaking, many times when you're bringing a new product to market, you don't really have a first customer. And so what you're doing is you're articulating all the different value that you see coming out of this new product that you're introducing, the new solution that you're bringing to market. So storytelling is really important because you're really trying to describe all the possibilities that come with whether it's a new technology or a whole solution or a new product or a service. And I think that's also why we've really invested over the last couple of years in storytelling at Xerox, is really to bring out the full set of value propositions that we bring to our customers, and that we're hoping to bring to our customers as, let's say the next decade or 2 decades or 3 decades go on. And that's really kind of our thought process, I think, around the importance of storytelling.
You mentioned, like, as you take it to a first customer, when you're, you have a brand new product, Xerox has done this multiple times. They've come up with something the world hasn't seen before. And so you're trying to get it out into the market, but you've never had a customer use it before. And so when you, as the guy who's supposed to, "They're cool Xeroxy thing," that's probably not the slogans you use. How much of the classic Xerox narrative do you use to create that opening to sort of like get that conversation started with a potential customer? Like, you can't really talk about the new thing because the new thing is so new. So you probably, how important is it to tie that new thing to the history of Xerox, or you sometimes just like sever the Xerox tail and start trying to talk about the new thing as its own little baby? Like, do you have strategies that you've developed on that, or do you have thoughts you'd like to share, or maybe even examples you might have?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, particularly I think, Brian, as you have experience with a lot of incubating startups, working with corporate partners. Many times, there's a temptation to try to sever the relationship between your history and where you're going. I think at Xerox we don't really see it that way. We understand that it's important for our customers to see the innovation that we're doing, but that doesn't mean that we need to get away from our, what I consider, very innovative legacy. And so we put that in context. I think when we're talking to new customers about some of our innovative new offerings, some that are on the horizon, some of that are around the corner, we definitely emphasize that we're a reliable partner. When we're bringing innovation to market, we're not going to leave you in the lurch because maybe something didn't work the way we both as partners thought it would. That we're going to bring this to fruition. And I think that involves a level of commitment, not only of investment, but of capabilities. Obviously, a company like Xerox has a lot more capabilities on the ground globally in terms of service and operations than your typical startup would, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and not to at all kind of diminish what startups do. I mean, they operate in very challenging environments. They have to be agile. They do a lot with very little. But I think we see that our legacy and our capabilities as an advantage, and I think our customers and partners see that too, because they many times will choose to talk to us about innovation. Not necessarily exclusively, of course, they're talking to the rest of the innovation ecosystem as well. But we definitely see that as something, a strength that we should continue to play to.
Yeah. And quick, when you're on your website, you talk about the sort of the pillars of innovation that Xerox is interested in, and one of the central things, I think you have like 8, I don't really remember, 6 or 8. And one of them is it says the future of work, which is very general. You have things like, digital printing or 3D analysis and artificial intelligence. But one of them just says the future of work, which is, in my estimation, my reflection, the classic Xerox story. We are, workplace innovation company. Do you try to take these other efforts while you're presenting them and tie them to that idea? Is that a big part of what, there's Nate. Hey, Nate. Do you tie them to that idea and have them kind of try to work our AI efforts into a future of work efforts?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of Xerox, and as I said, we're looking at work expansively. So I think historically there was a concept of a workplace, sort of an enterprise workplace that was familiar to everybody, quote unquote, going to the office. I think as the digital era continues to progress, one of the things we're finding is that the types of work that Xerox supports with our workplace technology are also growing, right, and shifting. So I think from some of the innovation areas that you've seen, Brian, with, let's say, 3D printing or with industrial IoT, the workplace that we're addressing is also going into the industrial environment, right? So we've got we look at the enterprise workplace, we also look at the industrial workplace. Just as I think, probably like 10, 15 years ago, people started to really seriously look at the mobile workplace, right? How work is becoming mobile. And obviously this year, a lot of focus across the board on the hybrid work environment. And I think when you think about the future of work, when we talk about the future of work, we see not only technology moving to different devices and different locations in the workplace, but also the workplace itself moving, and us, shifting with our technology to those places where people are working. So definitely an expansive view spanning, what would traditionally been sort of an enterprise workplace environment, going into other places. SMBs, of course, are very interested in work from home, because many of them have simply, especially this year, totally abandoned what would have been considered a traditional workplace. So that's kind of the concept, I think, for us with future of work.
Like you mentioned, I work with a lot of startups. We're always doing AI startups. It's a big part of my day is to think about how I can take a small team of people and go into a corporation. You guys start with a legacy of data that like these startups would, totally envy, because you can walk in and say, yeah, we have, 100 million rows on IoT. I'm fascinated by how much time you spend looking at what you have in order to say, like, hey, we have all of this data, or we have all of this technology. Do you spend a lot of time sort of mixing and matching it like Legos in the back room, thinking about how could we recombine this into a new thing? Is that part of your innovation process?
Yeah, I think that, the question of data, like, leveraging data to improve products and improve offerings, I think this has been a big area of focus for every company, especially over the last few years, you can feel it from all the jargon in the industry around big data and machine learning and all of these concepts that have over time been refined, let's say over the last 15, 20 years have been in the works and are coming to fruition now. So I think we understand the importance of data. We also understand the importance of our customers' sensitivity about their own data. This is not, we're not in the business of offering sort of, free products that the hook is that we monetize your data. We've been a B2B and enterprise service provider for a very long time, obviously from, almost from the first part of our history. So we understand that importance. At the same time, we also, I think understand, and I think, Brian, that's something that's coming up in the industry now a lot, is how, sometimes there is very limited data in certain customer use cases, which customers are in fact looking for products which can get started with very little. And they're looking for those service providers and solution partners and innovators that have sophisticated models that can be brought in. So I think that's definitely an area of focus for us, is realizing that there seems to be a gap in the market with innovation where getting started with limited data is in fact of high value to many of customers and who are getting engaged with us. And so we see some of that as a kind of a cool area for us to get involved in, especially historically, that's kind of where we played, particularly in AI, is around model-based.
Brian loves to get into the details, but I kind of want to take a step back to something that you said earlier, and Brian also alluded to it, And you started to talk about the future of work. And when the three of us met before, because we were preparing for this, you were talking a little bit about how it is that Xerox sees the future of work. And it's not just through all of these specific technologies. You were talking a lot about, the way in which communication will change and the way in which, well, that was actually the big one that I remember. And there was but you also spoke to just the idea of mobility and how Xerox kind of wants to follow where the work is. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. What are some of these ideas that get you really excited about how you're moving forward? What are the ones that feel like it is really like there's a lot of continuity? I'm sure they all have a lot of continuity, but what might be like a surprising direction that Xerox is also going in that, maybe most of us haven't really even thought of before?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So so one of the things I think for me, having spent a good chunk of my career previously in telecom, is that the world is getting much more connected, right? And so there was an era when the a very major innovation was around connecting people, and I think that that continues. That's a huge area of innovation across the board. But now there's a whole thread around the Internet of Things and about getting things connected for the benefit of of people who are in all kinds of use cases. And so that's really exciting. I mean, I think we're just getting started on that, as the world is really just getting started on that. Certainly Xerox is seeing that trend. Some of it, I think we've created. If you think about it, the office, office technology that we've deployed over so many years, it was some of the first, earliest technology to be connected in the workplace. And so this is something that we've thought about deeply for a long time, the value of being connected to human communication, to getting business done. And for me, again, having come out of telecom and seen the sort of the rise of the internet era, I think that's an extremely exciting part of what we expect to see in the future, and also how we're thinking about innovation. In terms of the new, experiences that can come out of more connected work, I think that's one of the reasons why Xerox is also looking at some of these industrial use cases for our technology, because we see industry, and industrial applications starting to get real value from connectivity, from work processes that previously never had much interaction with data, in the sense that those of us who've been in information technology jobs and related fields have seen over the years. So industrial applications are starting to feel the benefits of that data infusion, the interactions between operators and even those who are working hands-on. They're starting to see that they can see into their equipment in a way that they never could before. Some of the ways we think about what could be done with new technology is to be able to see into the future of your equipment, right? So how's your equipment going to perform, let's say in a few months? And rather than being reactive, can we facilitate proactive work processes? So that's really kind of, I think what's really exciting about what's coming is this new infusion of data into places, into workplaces and work processes, which previously we hadn't seen before, which really wasn't possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty, I like the way that you're saying that, seeing into the future of your, something that can feel really pedestrian, but actually makes a huge difference, right, for these different businesses.
Yeah.
Brian, you look like you're about to ask a question.
I think one of the things when we start adding new devices and new IoT into our environments, including the workplace environment and any environment, you start finding new information sources, right? So like we plan for, it's just like science, right? Every time you take a step forward, you find out there's more you don't know. So when you get into the world of IoT, when I'm talking to people about developing IoT products, a lot of times it's like, we want to monitor this thing and see how it returns. Not realizing that by monitoring that, you're actually creating a whole new dimension of information, because now now you know how this signal is being broadcast. and you can start seeing correlations to other signals. And you can start sort of tying an example I like to use is we didn't know 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't know that the subnetwork of tree roots actually exchange information through electrochemical signals. Like now we know that, now we can pick up on new information sources within our environment. And I'm fascinated by the idea of like, you taking the Xerox story, the printer might be actually a source of information, not just like, is it low or high on toner, but there might be other things that indicate building health or even environmental health when you associate it to the other products or the other sort of monitoring devices in the room. And that's a position that Xerox has that they're able to exploit, and that they'll be able to see the incoming signals and say things like air quality, interior air quality, or these printable things that you have. Those are collecting new signals, and we can say like maybe we can monitor air quality by how much toner is being used at a certain time. Like there's going to be surprises. Yeah, I'm wondering if you have any sort of examples of things where you've been surprised, but you've walked in and gone, "This is our new tech." I know all of your stuff is super new, so you don't have a lot of road testing on it, but I'm excited by that idea of kind of going, "Wow, it just opened up a whole new, mental universe."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the ways that so I can talk about even what we've already have out there today, and I think there's a lot more in terms of what can be done with this kind of technology. That I think what you're getting at really is that we have some of these experiences or products that are already in place that with new let's say new software or new ways of using software, you can get a whole new world of value out of. And I think we've seen that a little bit with what we've been doing, like Xerox has done with our multifunction printers that are in offices everywhere. We added an apps platform onto it. And when you think about that, many people are like, well, what are we going to do with apps, on a printer? But customers have started finding like new and really interesting things to do with it. And there's a bunch of things that are happening. There's like developers working on these, and without getting into sort of the nitty gritty of like what people are doing in their work processes, I think that's definitely a really interesting way of thinking about it. Is that when you have a sophisticated connected device in a what's normally a fairly highly frequented location, because it's people pass by the printer or visit it to get their paper or scan and do that. What are all the things you can do with it? Certainly you can add additional sensors and let's say radios so that people can interact with it in a different way. In some cases we've added like a voice device to it so that those who have a hard time sort of reaching over and typing things onto it can interact with it using a voice interface. But I think the general idea of thinking about extending technology that has been around and people are used to in new ways, because you can add modular new technology onto it, or you can add new software onto it. I think it's if you think about it, the world of the smartphone really opened everybody's eyes to this, right? That you could have every day a different experience with your device. And what we've learned, I think, from the consumer world of technology is that in many ways the same can apply into the business world and the enterprise business world, is that you can add a lot more value onto hardware that's been around for a while. So I think we're definitely on the same page with that. I think this year, with all of the sort of the health implications of the workplace, and I think previous to this year and going forward, in people's minds, there's a lot more concern and recognition of, let's say, the environmental factors about air quality, as well as climate change, all of these things. We've certainly started thinking about what are the other types of data that our users and customers are interested in. And like a really small thing that we did is, like, even for our own use, we introduced an app for those who wanted to use it among our customers and even internally to report your health, how you're doing during the COVID crisis. And so that can be used to figure out, who can come into the office, who shouldn't be in the office, and why they're not there. And that, immediately got like a really nice reaction from people, because it's something simple. It's like you think about it, it's like a point solution almost for enterprise, but it solves an immediate problem. And then people start thinking about, well, there's other things maybe that I can do with this. Now that I have a little check-in mechanism, maybe I can think about doing something else with it. So just extending those technologies and use cases, I think it's a powerful way of thinking about how we as an innovator can look ahead into what customers are going to appreciate in terms of innovation in the future.
That makes me think about, we're talking a lot about new sources of information and new kinds of data. And for me, that makes me think about, well, what are the new kinds of stories that then we could tell, right? Because there's all kinds of emergent things that are happening that maybe, didn't exist before. And when I was doing some research into Xerox, you have this one category that's very mysterious. It's not that mysterious, but it sounds mysterious, and it's called the sixth sense, right? And so I think, you talked about IoT, about sensors. You also have something called, I just really want to say this word, it's the hyperspectral camera, which sees invisible things, like things that aren't visible to our eye. And so, you're speaking to all these new sources of information and data that is being generated. And of course, those can always go and power new apps, new service, all of that kind of stuff. But I am interested in how, can you talk a little bit about how do you translate that for the average person, or for, new customers or your partners, or even internally, in terms of, who is Xerox becoming, And one of the things I was thinking about is, it's pretty fascinating because Xerox is really, it's synonymous with the copy, right? And the copy spawned all kinds of new behavior. Like, we didn't really have zines in the same way. There were things with the printing press and stuff like that, but everyone from like punk rockers to, young editors and everyone in between, it's like the copy became like this really important thing. And even now, like the copyright, when you talk about digital, it's like this whole sort of realm of culture and business and all of these things that it kind of spawned and generated. So I'm just curious, just kind of back to the question in terms of who is Xerox becoming. Do you guys have metaphors for how you talk about, all this new stuff, all this new way of working? And yeah.
I think when I think about it, I think that the metaphors emerge as you kind of execute on the vision, and I think we see ourselves as a workplace technology company that's not tethered to a workplace, that we're looking forward. This year was the 50th anniversary of Park, and we think about sort of the last 50 years of innovation, how much the world has changed, and how much we've changed the world, and then we think about the next 50 years, and what can we do that has a similarly positive impact on communications, on how people work, on what they can accomplish. So there's this, if there's a metaphor for this year, I think it would be, what can you do in the next 50 years that you've done, that you did well in the last 50, right? And I think it's very timely, because I think this year being what it is, many people are kind of have a 1 year focus. We just have to make it out of this year, right?
I do.
Right. But the concept of being resilient, I think it's important resiliency is important from a personal perspective, obviously, as all of us have discovered. It's also important from, a social perspective, from a business perspective, and taking the long view, taking a long view of your successes and lessons learned. I think it's been really important for us, given, the 50th anniversary of Park and of all the innovations that have come out of here, but also to look forward in a similarly, long horizon, a view that takes a similarly long horizon. So I think that's one aspect of it. I do think that, we have so many different kinds of areas that we've been working on. You named some of them, whether it's imaging or whether it's, AI and sensing. We have historically had this great partnership in the sense that we've done a lot of work and continue to do much work with DARPA. So, and DARPA has always got these fascinating projects that they have us, engaged on. And I think the benefit of that, certainly for the partnership, there are concrete benefits in terms of the work we're doing and delivering. But there are also benefits for Xerox in terms of how we take that forward into other use cases, into potentially future commercial products in areas where not only we may not have sort of delved before, but many others wouldn't have thought about it either unless these sort of competitions had kicked off the discussion. And so that's a recent area that we've gotten into is DARPA's got a project called the Ocean of Things, which is about introducing sensors into the oceans to be able to get data in a place at a time in a way that never was possible before. And it's a really fascinating project. And if you think about what's Park doing there, what's Xerox doing there, what does workplace have to do with the oceans? Hey, I don't know where the workplace is going to be 50 years from now, right? So if folks are getting interested, and I think there's a lot of people out there in the world that are very interested in what's happening in the oceans, given the size, of the oceans in the world, we should be paying attention to that. We should be putting in, applying technology where it's appropriate from our own, development areas into that. So I think that's how we think about it. Is that it's a very expansive way of thinking. At the same time, we're not going to do everything. So that's something we're also cognizant of.
It's funny you brought up. There's actually a connection in the last two topics. Ronnie mentioned the hyperspectral camera, which I also find fascinating, and I've thought a lot about how can we use that in agriculture. But
do you want to describe what it is really quickly, just so people in the audience can understand what it is?
Yeah, Momin, you want to describe the hyperspectral camera?
So I won't. Yeah, no, I won't. I'm not an expert on the hyperspectral camera, so I'll probably stay away from that one. But I will say, I'll generally say that we do have a number of capabilities around imaging, and obviously, we've developed some of those capabilities because imaging is important in scanning and doing that kind of work. There's also a number of innovations that come out of imaging that are related to our work in AI, because we process and do work in computer vision. But then there are things like hyperspectral camera, which is a combination of some of these things, right? Of software, but also of what you can do with sensors. And so it's one of the manifestations of the technology that's really interesting, although I can't get into like what exactly, how it works. But I think that's basically sort of part of the theme of working on imaging and computer vision.
The part that's interesting to me, obviously, is the collection of new dimensions of information. And one of the things, just sort of tying together two threads, a couple of days ago, it was announced that the Tasmanian devil actually has a bioluminescence factor. When you view it in a under a hyperspectral camera, in the larger parts of the spectrum, you can actually see purple glowing around its, we'd call it purple, around its eyebrows and its ears. So the Tasmanian devil, a favorite of mine as a kid, has this bioluminescence property. And one of the story that I was listening to on the radio, or reading, I don't remember, went on to explain that the primary place you see bioluminescence in nature is within the oceans, right? Mostly oceanic and aquatic creatures have this. I don't know why that's true, but I've known this from when I was a marine biologist in graduate school. And one of the things we know is that the health of these, particularly the algae that are bioluminescent, is indicated by how much luminescence they can generate. So the idea of being able to point a camera at the ocean, detect the bioluminescence, and say, like, we have a clean or clear, we have the right nutrification of this particular environment. Those are these big things that a company like Park can tackle. Like a startup going to have a hard time with that. We're not going to be able to fly, take this massively expensive camera and fly it all over the oceans and then do the amount of data processing needed. But Park can take on these really, really big bites, which is really sort of, it's enviable, number one. But also because of that, you can find these other areas where these phenomena are occurring. I think these technologies are developing when you put them in conjunction with things with other technologies like your 3D printing, the cameras, or the AI, allow you to tackle really, really big problems. And I'm curious, getting to my question now, sorry, I'm just excited because I love the Tasmanian devil and that was a neat story. I'm curious if you have things that are like problems that either you personally are driven by, or that are common in the office, that are like these big, like the BHAGs as they used to call them, when I was a younger man, the big, hairy, audacious goals that you're kind of sitting there going like, we have a really big technology gun, if you'll forgive the metaphor. And I'd really like to figure out a way to point it at that. Are there like things that are really driving you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things right now for all of us is around climate change. And certainly I won't be the first to talk about this. Our CTO has spoken about this several times, I think even this year specifically, is what can we do about climate change? And I think that's one of the reasons why Xerox has committed itself to some clean tech work that we're doing. It's one of our innovation areas that we've been working on. We don't have a commercial product yet in that. It's still sort of, we're working through the kinks on it. But it's an area where I think if we could make a big impact, that's something that's going to change the game for the world, right? For the whole planet, for society in general. And so that's certainly something that is keeping a number of people at Xerox Park very, very busy. I think now if you start thinking sort of in the terms of like the big problems that we're going after with each of the individual technologies, the other ones I'll just mention right off the top, if sort of this year really brought into focus what fragility in supply chains can cause in terms of direct business impact, consumer impact, so many things. And so the fact that we're investing in 3D printing, which makes manufacturing on demand possible, and it's our position is that this is no longer about prototyping. This is about using what you print in production operations. That we think is a game changer for businesses, because it's not in the sense revolutionary that we're introducing manufacturing all over again. No, it's not what it's about. But what it's about is, over time, people have discovered that everybody who's doing manufacturing has this, I guess in some ways a perennial problem of their supply chain having been dealt these blows along the way that could in some instances kill the business. And so what are the things that you can do to really close the gap and have technology that can help you be more resilient? So we think that 3D printing is addressing a big problem that sometimes is invisible to us as end consumers, but it's certainly a kind of thing that keeps operations executives up at night. And you being a mathematician, Brian, I'm sure there's a lot of applications in operations research and operations management that mathematicians sit around sort of applying their math to make sure that there's not going to be these bumps. So that's another area. The other one is this thing with the oceans. I mean, can you do something to have better visibility into what's happening out there, and in an ecosystem where we've only kind of just skimmed the surface over there over the years? Those are sort of the big ones, I think, that are keeping a number of people at Xerox busy, and certainly probably keeping a number of people, very smart people at Xerox, up at night working on those problems.
That's super inspiring. I feel like we could probably do like another couple hours just kind of getting into that. But we do have some questions. Klaus has been very patiently asking us questions, so I want to get at least one of or two of his in. And so I'm going to let you choose, because I think they're both interesting and they both follow on to what you're asking. What we were just talking about. So his first question was, are you considering workforce implications in terms of training, income, and social ecology? But then I think also more immediately, based on what we were just talking about, he asked, have you considered agriculture, since it implies a whole system change up and down the supply chain? So you can pick. I'm going to let you decide which one you want to speak to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can try to take both and one maybe a little bit more briefly. Yeah, I think the first question was around sort of workforce implications. I think the way we think about the new technologies is very much focused on what our technologies can do to make people's interactions with technology better, to make their work processes better. And I think that necessarily has workforce implications. We're not trying to take sort of just a rose-colored view of the world of technology, but the primary goal is really to augment, human interactions and human, work processes. So that's really really the underpinnings of everything we've been doing. In terms of this sort of the specific case of agriculture, we've certainly looked at use cases in agriculture. I think at this stage we don't have any particular technology that we're talking about, or we're have implemented as such in agriculture out of the major innovation areas that we've been talking to. There's some ideas that we have that I think could apply, the technologies could apply to in the future, or could apply to agriculture, those technologies, but we're not quite there yet. And Xerox being Xerox, we try not to overcommit to things or go too crazy with what we're trying to do. So we're taking it one step at a time.
Okay, amazing. And if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. Okay, there's another one fresh off the the box. Let's see. When I think of Xerox, my immediate knee-jerk is of an older legacy brand, yet listening today, I'm hearing about innovation and cutting-edge stuff. If you could articulate how the world should be thinking about Xerox 2020 as a brand, what should be going through our minds? That's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I spend all my time on innovation, and so I would love for people to see us as a company that has been innovating and is going to be innovating, in areas which are of I would think critical importance to different parts of business. So whether it's improving a manufacturer's supply chain, or producing sensors and solutions which allow you to monitor areas and react and be proactive in them that you couldn't be before. At the same time, we're not surprised that people see us as a company that's been around a long time, because we have been around a long time. And we have technology that's in so many people, so many offices and so many places. So it's very well recognized. We don't want to sort of step away from that legacy and say, hey, just forget about all the work we've done before, because we think it's important. It had an important impact. But we certainly want people to know that we're here and looking forward to a long road of innovation ahead, of investment, of engagement, of really sort of having these interactions with other innovators like yourselves. I think that's very exciting for us. I want to continue to do that. And Park is quite active in the heart of Silicon Valley, and still doing these sort of very interesting projects.
There's so many ways you could step into so many fields. I mean, agriculture is something that I've been interested in for a while. And you think about your 3D printing technology and how, replacement parts are expensive and hard to find on many farms, especially for older equipment. But the CAD files are out there, right? So it would not be hard to deliver a new blade to a particular mechanism, for instance, throughout the country on demand. And that reduces the carbon footprint of all the maintenance and service and maintenance. It's like, that's just one example of the ways that you guys could be participating. I mentioned the spectrography earlier, the ability to do soil health from aerial reconnaissance. So there's lots of people working in that field. I think that, coming from a startup perspective, we often think of, we startups are the ones with the brilliant ideas, which is true, I will say. But it's also important to understand that the resources of a company like you allows you to have brilliant ideas as well. Like Park can really think very high and very big. Walking into agriculture, you have a dozen ways to do it. You even have a whole sort of green buildings initiative I was reading about, where you can think about how the efficiency of every building, which honestly, it's hard to do in the cities because the cities have all these legacy old buildings that are hard to maintain, but much easier to do in newer developments. So there's some places you could definitely play that the smaller players aren't able to get into. I like the idea of you guys, trying to to use a basketball analogy, the Lakers are a legacy. You just expect them to win. There are many, you just sort of expect that to happen. So Xerox could see themselves as the Lakers of innovation. Like, you expect them to win. Yeah, we've been around a long time. Maybe you're sick of watching them do this stuff, but they have these big moments and they can take on these big goals, like another ring. Sorry, I won't go into Lakers much longer. But I like the idea of you using that legacy and trying to go forward and say, yeah, let's own the legacy. Let's do it. Let's be it. And that's evidence that we're going to do it again. I'm not sure how you tie that into a message, but it's definitely something that's viable from your perspective.
I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, because in many ways, these the problems that are out there are certainly startups are doing their job in trying to address them with fresh thinking and moving fast and trying out things which maybe larger companies are not willing to do, or risks larger companies are not willing to take. At the same time, these sort of scale problems, they require the attention of companies like ours, that have experienced them also over a long period of time and understand what it means to get into something in a serious way, in a committed way, in a way that could be a multi-year engagement. And I think that's one of the things you see from those companies that we partner with, our customers, that are engaging with us in new areas of innovation, is they want a level of commitment. They want to know that that Xerox, we can work with Xerox because Xerox is actually, has stood the test of time, has been around. We've done business with them for a while, or we know our competitors have done business with them for a while, and they have the credibility that if they're going to get involved in something, they're not just going to walk away from it at the first sign of trouble. And I think that there is a world of problems that are in that category that require a sustained level of attention besides the innovation that we're bringing to the table. And I think we're very, very proud and fortunate to have innovators at Xerox that continue that legacy of innovation straight into the future, who aren't really looking back. They just keep looking forward. And it's always fun to see that. It's always fresh to see that, the new science that's happening. But if you're thinking from a business perspective, like if you've ever been on the buyer side in a business relationship, before you're ready to spend your money, you always kind of do your due diligence on the partner you're getting in with, because you have, as a business buyer, you have a lot at stake too. You have customers to answer to as well. So I think, when, if we're talking to a CEO and she's thinking about doing business with us, we know that that's part of the conversation, that we're going to, we need to articulate that message that this is, we have the credibility besides the innovation capabilities.
I want to ask a follow-up question to that, because, I think it's interesting. There are a lot of companies that, well, not a lot, but there are some companies such as yourselves that have been around now for, 100, 150 years, and they're very well known sort of on the consumer side for one thing. And I think it's understandable that maybe people don't know about all the innovation that's happening because they're just not exactly they're not the final customer, although they are exposed to a lot of, the products and services. But I kind of almost find it shocking sometimes, just how far and how deep you're going into some of these arenas. And I was wondering if there is, I'm just curious, because they're Silicon Valley companies, and I can imagine that somewhere between, becoming broader in a way, right? Because we no longer have these kinds of vertical categories. You're getting into manufacturing, you're getting into imaging, you're getting into IoT and sensing. I mean, there's all these arenas, and while it's all under the framework of work, as you say, work itself is essentially changing, and so are the the people who are working within that. I was wondering if you could just ask a little bit about, if you could just say a little bit about the way in which how challenging it is to get some of those messages out there. Is that even a desire? You know, maybe it's that people within your B2B community, your partners, your customers, they already know all of that. You know, it's like, it could be that it's not necessarily, the stories aren't for the, you know, for the consumer in the same way. And I think there might also be something about like how innovation goes beyond tech at Xerox, you know, because, and in part because you've got this wealth of, you know, brain trust. You've got a wealth of a brain trust over there that's been kind of hammering away at things for years. And so I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is, is sometimes companies, should have aspirations about getting their message out to the end users, to consumers, even though we're B2B. Certainly, we don't shy away from those who engage with us. We've got a nice social channel. We sometimes use fun things there so that people also get the element of fun that goes with work. Work shouldn't just be kind of boring, drab stuff. There should be an element of kind of fun built into that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think we recognize who we are, and we don't want to lose the opportunity to really bring out those strengths in the value proposition for our customers, who are essentially businesses. I think it's fair to say that we want to make sure our innovation message gets out to the businesses, since they're very relevant to what we're doing, and that's kind of where our mind is. I think there is certainly a deliberate thinking about staying true to the roots that we have and telling that story in really its full capacity, rather than trying to go after something which is not necessarily authentic for us. And I think that's why when you see sort of the stories and the case studies and those things that are on our web pages and what we post, they're very authentic to what we're doing for our customers, who are almost exclusively businesses. But the stories are very varied. The innovation isn't necessarily just about technology. It's about different aspects of work, about making work fun or making work interesting, not necessarily just about productivity. That's how I see the benefits of really exploring stories in their fullness and in an expansive way is, but you have to stay authentic. You don't want to just try to copycat somebody else, right? Because we're in the Valley and consumer technology companies are big, we should just kind of be like them. No, I think it's important for us that we stay true to the message, that we're making work better in many different dimensions, but that's kind of our sweet spot in terms of what we can do for the world.
On that note, I'm curious to know what will the authentic story of 2020 look like for Xerox? Like, this has been, a bitch of a year, and we're all kind of like, really, you don't really know. Like, you can talk about your 10-year ago self really clearly, right? But 10 years ago, you had no idea of who you were. So are you formulating in your brain like, this is, oh my God, this is how we're going to explain what we did, or explain who we were during 2020?
I think certainly something to think about right now, right? With the year kind of coming to a close, resilience is a huge part of that story, right? And I think not just for us, but for so many businesses who have kind of who made it through the year. I think being adaptable. One of the things we did this year during the pandemic is we took on producing medical devices, because ventilators were in high demand in the world for obvious reasons, and so we reconfigured some of our manufacturing capacity. We did the same for like hand sanitizer, and we sort of got into action. And I think that's a great part of 2020's story for Xerox, is showing how we can adapt, not just to the world, but also to ourselves, right? Sometimes you have to prove to yourself that, hey, we can change in ways that we've never done before. Like, we haven't produced medical equipment before, but with the talented people we have and some commitment, we can do that. So I think resilience and adaptation, that's really the story of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's
well, let's hope that let's hope that it's not the be, I feel like everybody's getting to that point now, but yeah, man, it's been rough.
Hey, it's been a tough
interesting
year.
to see how people are gonna. Yeah. Anyway, Ronnie, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
No, that's all right. I was gonna say a similar thing. I mean, it's just been, it's been the theme of, it's been the prevailing theme of the year, and hopefully 2021 will bring different kinds of narratives and stories to talk about.
Definitely innovation. That's the big story for 21.
Forcefully, right? Like necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that we've seen so much new necessity this year. It's, if it wasn't for the catastrophic events, it would be one of the most interesting things I've ever seen. And actually delightful in many ways, because you're like, new problems, new solutions. But the human cost is just too much to sustain that emotion and that interest, But yeah, I think that the future of work, wow, we got a big data dump on the future of work this year. Artificial intelligence, IoT, all of those things, my personal experience, we're seeing a lot of new information come in this year. And it's been almost exhilarating from that sort of learnings perspective, but just sort of horrifying from the real humanity and social perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, everyone, we are at time, and thank you so much for joining us on The Future We Create. We will be following up with a recording to this session. Thank you all, and for more information about Verdant AI, you can go to verdant.ai. Collective Future, Ronnie, the URL for Collective Future is collectivefuture.com.
Yeah,
that's right. And you can always find Momin at Xerox.com. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks very much.
Xerox, Google Xerox, you might be able to find it. Yeah.
See y'all. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.